So what are we talking about today? Today we're talking about the outdoor test for the Lumix G85 with the Meike 35 f1.7, and we're comparing that to the Nikon 50 with the speed booster. Now, with the speed booster is a very critical point, because remember, the focal length of 35 and the focal length of 50 on the speed booster is about the same thing. So it's about 35.5 on the speed booster. So again, I want to thank Gaffer Power for supplying this gaff tape. I've been finding a lot of uses for it, especially this bright color. Hold on. So last week we went over some color charts for the indoor test, and now you are actually seeing on the tight shot, this is the Meike 35 f1.7. Now, really quickly, just to finish the story from last week, what happened is I had this lens and I had the 51.8. So we had this shot we had on the 51.8, and what was going on was it didn't look, the cropping didn't look the same, because we essentially had one of the cameras was on 4K mode, so it cropped in. So sorry about that, mystery solved for that. But I want to take a look at some outdoor tests today, and afterward we're going to go through a few points about each lens. Okay, so we're starting here with daylight, and we might do another recording with low light, but this is going to be just daylight. So the first thing to note, there's a little bit of lens flare. If you'll notice, I put my hand over it a couple times to shield it. But see, you can see the focus pull on the max aperture is pretty good. There you go. I'm putting my hand over, see the change in the color there. So now we're comparing it to the Nikon 50 on the Viltrox focal reducer, starting with the second stop down. And these are all straight out of camera. Remember, this is the standard color profile with 0, 0, 0, 0. So now the Meike at f2. And keep an eye out for the lens flare. You'll notice sometimes it'll get darker. That's me shielding it with my hand. So back to the Nikon. On the third stop down, I have to state it that way on the Viltrox focal reducer because you can't really say what aperture it's at. It's just a marking on the focal reducer itself. So now the Meike at f2.8, and look at the shutter speed. Of course, because I'm on program mode to maintain the exposure, the shutter speed is going to be a little wacky. So it's probably not following the 180-degree rule. But you see the focus pull there is not bad, even at f2.8. Now back to the Nikon again on the focal reducer. So we always start with the focus on the center of the pinwheel, and then we go as best as we can to the faraway pinwheel. And the thing about that is I may not always nail the focus right on the back item. Now back to the Meike at f4. So if you're noticing that the focus breathing is actually better on the Meike, whereas the Nikon has the tendency to change the size of the near and far objects when it focuses, so watch for that. Back at the Nikon again, and did you see that? That was, substantial image. Just basically the image breathing is a lot worse on the Nikon. Back to the Meike at f8. And as we get closer to the smallest aperture, you can see the focus pull is very subtle. And back to the Nikon, the seventh stop down. And we're getting a little bit darker on the exposure because we're just, even the program mode can't bring it up quite enough. So again, a very subtle focus pull when you are at close to the max or the minimum aperture. So now f22, that's the minimum aperture on the Meike. So let's see how it looks. Just a very, very small shift to get from foreground to background. And then let's take a look at the Nikon again. Coming up next. I think I came back there on that focus. So now the Nikon, you can see some lens flare right off the bat. I put my hand up to block it. And we are at the smallest aperture on the focal reducer with the Nikon. And you can tell when it gets a little bit magenta there, that's when the lens flare comes in. So this would be a good time for me to introduce my new testing method called QPACE. And let's take a look at the acronym here. QPACE stands for quality, portable, affordable, common, and easy to use. So all of these things are critical for my system. You can buy something, of course, nobody wants to buy something that's not good quality. But I'm going to explain a little bit more about portable, affordable, common, and easy to use. So the first one, Q for quality. So the Nikon 51.8, even with the focal reducer, wins for quality. I found that the Meike, even though you noticed in some of those, especially the daylight shots, it was more colorful, but in a certain sense, it had crushed black in the shadows, and it was just too contrasty for this lens sensor combination. And that's the thing to keep in mind. Remember, this is all based on lens sensor combinations. And so with the Panasonic GX85, I don't think it's a good match. Now, it's not a bad match. It's not horrible, but I'm just talking about, the most authentic, most realistic shot, I think, is from the Nikon. So for quality, the Nikon wins against the focal reducer. Now, there was an issue that was worse on the Nikon as far as quality, and that was for focus breathing. Now, for the P, which is portable, both are very portable, but the focal reducer that's with the Nikon is more flexible. If you have a bag and you're carrying, let's say the Meike lens, the one you're looking at right now, you're carrying that one, but then you also have Nikkor lenses on the side, you're essentially going to have the focal reducer as an extra thing you carry. Whereas if you just use the focal reducer plus a Nikon, you leave that on the camera, and that brings me to, and then all the other lenses are there. So basically, it's about the same amount of space, but there's another advantage here to leaving it on the camera. I'll talk about that later though, because it is to me a big deal. You leave the focal reducer on the sensor, and I guess a little bit of a spoiler here, it protects the sensor. So let's get to that. That's one of my extra points, my special bonus section on the end. We'll talk about that. So let's get to the next one. After portable, we have affordable. So the Meike is less expensive at first, for only $69 US plus shipping and handling. So what do I mean by at first? Well, if you consider the fact that you buy this prime lens that is a native micro four thirds mount, and you later want to expand your lens line, the top recommendation I have for a low-cost way to expand your lens line is to buy this focal reducer and just buy older Nikon lenses. So essentially, you're saving money up front, but in the long run, if you end up buying the Nikon plus the focal reducer, you're really just not going to use this lens much anymore. So let's go on to the next one. So the common aspect. Well, the Nikon 51.8 wins. It's a very common lens worldwide. In fact, I saw an article that said that it was the #1 most popular lens in the world. And I don't mean the most common in this scenario as far as quantity that's on the market. It used to be, but it's the most respected, most well-liked lens in the world. And coming in at number 2, you probably could guess, is the Canon 70-200 f2.8L. As far as being common, it's pretty easy to get your hands on a Nikon 50 1.8. But like I say, you could actually still buy these brand new from Nikon on Amazon. So the next one is easy to use. This is the last part of the acronym, and this is maybe the most important part as far as what I teach on my channel and in my system in general. You got to be able to use it. It's got to be easy to use when you're under pressure or when you're not. So the Meike wins for ease of use because of the declicked aperture. Now let's take a look. Take a look at the Nikon here again and just talk about this. It doesn't have a declicked aperture. It's got, on the Viltrox focal reducer, it's got fairly quiet but still definite stops. So that's it for today. Thank you everyone for watching, and there's going to be more along the lines of testing lenses, but it's going to be specific to my system. And if you don't know much about my system, check out my website, silverlightphotoco.com. And remember, my system is all about, my big number one tip is always shoot with at least 2 cameras. So thank you everyone again, and have a great day.